President Donald Trump today issued a stern warning to Russian President Vladimir Putin, stating that if Moscow does not halt its ongoing war in Ukraine, there will be very severe consequences for Russia. His remarks come at a time when political and military tensions between Washington and Moscow are at a peak, and the entire world is closely watching the moves of these two global powers. Trump's warning directly touches on the future of U.S.-Russia relations, and analysts are predicting that whatever comes next could have far-reaching consequences for global peace, the economy, and even the possibility of a new large-scale war. Speaking at a press conference in the White House, Trump made it clear that he is prepared to act if Russia continues its assaults in Ukraine, particularly in areas where Kyiv's forces are trying to regain control. He warned that unless Putin takes immediate steps to stop the fighting, the United States is preparing measures far stronger than before, including not only harsher economic sanctions but also possible direct military actions or significantly expanded military aid to Ukraine. This brings back echoes of the Cold War era, when the US and the Soviet Union regularly exchanged threats to pressure each other into backing down from their strategic goals. If Russia ignores Trump's warning, we could see a rapid shift in US defense policy, with increased deployment of American troops to Eastern Europe, particularly in countries bordering Ukraine or Russia such as Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia. Such a move would further escalate strategic tensions, as Moscow has repeatedly declared that it sees U.S. military presence near its borders as an unacceptable security threat. Russia's response could be aimed directly at the United States or take the form of intensified operations in Ukraine to signal that it will not be intimidated by Washington's threats. The economic consequences of an escalation would be significant. New U.S. sanctions on Russia could disrupt global trade, triggering fresh inflation in fuel and energy prices. Russia is one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas, and global market prices are closely tied to stability in that region. If Russia retaliates by cutting back energy exports, Europe and parts of Asia could face an energy crisis, which would in turn impact the U.S. economy. American consumers could see rising costs for fuel, food, and services, creating internal political pressure on the White House. In addition, such a breakdown in relations could freeze key negotiations on nuclear arms control and the regulation of advanced military technologies. Russia and the U.S. have long-standing treaties aimed at limiting weapons of mass destruction, but if ties worsen, those agreements could collapse. This would risk a renewed arms race, with both countries rushing to develop more advanced and destructive weapons, again evoking the dangerous atmosphere of the 20th century Cold War. The rest of the world would be forced to take sides, with many European countries likely supporting the US, while some nations in Asia or Africa might lean toward Russia, deepening the divisions in the global order. From a military standpoint, if Trump's warning fails, the US could dramatically expand its support for Ukraine's armed forces. This could involve sending more long-range missiles, advanced fighter jets, and intensive training for Ukrainian troops. Such aid would significantly boost Kyiv's defensive capabilities but also increase the risk of direct U.S.-Russia clashes, especially if American-supplied weapons cause major Russian casualties. A direct confrontation between the two powers would be unpredictable and could spiral into a much wider conflict involving other global powers. The security implications for the world are enormous. If Russia persists in its offensive and the U.S. escalates militarily, NATO could become fully involved in the conflict, given its close ties to Ukraine. Such a clash could become the largest war in Europe since World War II. There's also a possibility that other major powers, such as China, could use the situation to expand their own political and military influence in other regions, further complicating the global balance of power. Ultimately, Trump's warning to Putin is a clear signal that relations between these two superpowers are moving into an even more dangerous phase. If Putin ignores the threat, the consequences could be severe across multiple fronts: political, economic, security, and the structure of the global order itself. At the current moment, one wrong move could push the world into a war whose outcome no one can fully predict, a stark reminder of how dangerous it becomes when great powers collide without a sustainable diplomatic solution. The coming days and weeks will determine whether Trump's warning leads to renewed dialogue and de-escalation, or marks the beginning of a new and perilous chapter of conflict that could touch every corner of the globe.